The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted all economies and livelihood around the world, and Cambodia is no exception. The various measures deployed by Cambodian authorities and private sector helped in weathering the local storm, but the complexity of globalized economies and the unpredictability of the pandemic render mitigation measures extremely difficult. Another important consequence is the disruption the pandemic created in regional supply chains, which fragilized households, firms, and SMEs across sectors, age groups, and social classes. Prior to COVID-19, Cambodia's economy was ranked as among the most dynamic in the world. I am very pleased to introduce Serey Chan, the Director General of the National Bank of Cambodia, who is from class 2017 and is well known in Cambodia as a champion for technology innovation and financial inclusion. Serey, several articles have been written on COVID-19 economic impact on Cambodia. What do you feel the pandemic has transformed kind of permanently? Do you have any specific views and thoughts you'd like to share to highlight what haven't been discussed enough, or what do you feel strongly about that maybe, report and analysis haven't necessarily reflected? Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
I think a lot of the article that has been written on Cambodia during this pandemic has been relatively negative. And I suppose we can say the same for many other countries, but I'm a positive person, and I would like to highlight some of the positive developments. As you know, there's always silver lining in every situation, and you've got to keep being positive. And what I've seen is transformations in the way people interact with each other. I mean, this is not just specific to Cambodia, this is everywhere. I am much more now on Zoom meeting than on a physical meeting. And I think also people now realize that the facts and having a proper internet connection is very important. Something that we all taken for granted. So I've increased, for instance, my subscription to the internet to something much faster, and of course, so that's one. So realizing, how internet connection is important during this period of time, and I think hopefully it would also spill over to the way policymakers are making decisions about, infrastructure. I know that bridge and roads are important. But when you have limited resources, you have to prioritize the area that you want to spend it on. So perhaps in the rural area, you want to prioritize on bridge and roads, but in the urban area, you want to prioritize, digital infrastructure. The second thing that I have observed, and it has not been emphasized enough, is the potential of agriculture. And perhaps in self-sufficiencies as well. I think agriculture, with Solinn, we've been discussing about this on many occasions, that, whatever the economic situations, whatever happen, people will continue to eat. And that is something that we can't emphasize enough. And I think Cambodia has a long history of being an agricultural country. And I'm not saying, being a very doing manual agriculture, but we can use technology to improve the way we're doing agriculture, improve, the productivities and logistics. That's something that I've seen, and hopefully with the migrant workers now coming back into the country, we'll find a way to utilize this labor properly. The third things that I have been also observing, of course, is in the digital payment that has been increasing. In fact, if you're waiting, maybe later tonight we'll be issuing something that, a lot of yesterday the Ministry of Health has issued a statement saying that the virus contamination through the handling of cash is relatively high. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to push forward this digital payment. And it's not just for the sake of digital payment. I mean, I've been working in financial inclusion for a very long time. And so digitalizations or digital payment would increase this access to finance. where you can use the data from the payment behavior to create a credit worthiness of the person, and eventually, provide this credit to the person. So that's some of the points I wanted to highlight, but I don't want to take too much time. We're overrun already.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Serey. Those are very relevant points, and I hope we'll have the time to kind of continue the discussion on those. It provides a very strong framework for the discussion. So I'm going to go to Franz now, and I'm going to just check if she's still online and if she can hear me. Franz, can you unmute yourself, and can you confirm you can hear me?
Yes, I'm very much online.
Excellent. So to all the participants, please let me introduce you to Franz Heng, who is the Managing Director of LHT Capital, and she's as well part of the class 2019. She operates within industries ranging from F&B, so food and beverage, retail, education, and health. Franz, as we all know, Cambodia is a liberal and open market economy. Is there any opportunities Cambodia should tap in once this pandemic is over? We would like to hear your thought on that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Natharoun, and for the introduction. Definitely, Cambodia is a liberal and open market. However, if we look at the two sectors that leading the economy, we are very much dependent on the foreign trade of the global foreign trade. For example, for the industrial sector that we have, yes, we are liberal open market, but we are really depending on how the larger country or the consumption country are setting their foreign policy against our country. And how I see coming out from the pandemic is what we can do is we can expand our industry sector, and we can synergize that sector with the agriculture together. So hopefully, to reference on what Bong Serey is saying, is we need to increase our productivity. Instead of just focusing on fabric industrial, we can focusing on food industrial. As we can see for the past 10 months, the retail sector that we operate, we feel very threatened by the neighboring country. If by mean they have to keep their supply for their population due to the upcoming shortage of supply due to COVID, then we will suffer with short of food supply, like the fresh produce. So I think COVID is a good interruption for Cambodia, where we can take next year to re-strategize our infrastructure, so we can reskill our labor to expand our industry sector to maybe add more to produce more value-added sector like food supply chain. So then eventually we can become one of the so we can utilize our natural resources in the country and become one of the exporting for food supply chain. And if you look at how our neighboring country is operating, they are really self-sustained during this kind of pandemic, where if the whole world is going into a Cold War, they will not have to suffer with the basic necessity. For us, we need to relook into how we're going to self-sustain in terms of how to survive. So after the pandemic, what we could do is we can synergize the industrial sector and the agriculture together to hopefully to create some form of new, it's not a new sector, an expanded sector, so can make us a stronger country economically during the downturn.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Franz. There are already as well some points that are connecting with the points that Serey was mentioning before. I'll bring that for future discussion. And the good thing as well is that there may be different opinions as well on certain topics, and that's what we want to encourage, different views, you know, different perspectives, and that's what we respect a lot as well within Asia 21. So let me now also welcome Solinn Lim, Country Director of Oxfam, class 2015. So Solinn is known as a strong advocate for social, economic, and climate justice. Solinn, could you please share with us and the participants how can COVID accentuated vulnerabilities for both urban and rural population? How can basically the vulnerabilities that COVID have created in rural and urban area be better addressed? How can we make a situation, people, system more resilient and more better prepared or more ready for, you know, future shocks that may come now or in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Natharoun, for putting together this excellent panel, and the hiccups we've had, especially the hiccup I experienced in terms of technology part. I think it's a perfect example of life that we've been through under COVID time. So for that question, from the experience that I have, we are working with communities across the 25 provinces of Cambodia. There are, maybe I'll just mention a little bit in terms of what we have observed. As Serey mentioned already, about the about 200,000 migrant workers that have returned to Cambodia. Some of them are going back from urban area Phnom Penh. Some are returning from other country, and those are concentrating in rural areas. The good things that we have observed is that no one has have to suffer in terms of not having 3 meals a day when they are residing in rural areas because of the family safety nets that Cambodia has, you know, and that's a good thing about the culture and the setting we have. But we also have seen that people will have to work longer hours. So for example, communities we're working with in the Tonle Sap area, they would now have to go on and fishing longer hours in the open waters, which is dangerous. But at least they're able to support all the family members that are returning. And we do work with those migrant returnees as well, to Serey's point, which is trying to retain people on the land, supporting them so that they could make their land, for those who have land, make their land more productive. If they don't have land, then they could participate in agriculture cooperatives and support the food production in different way. This part of the support we're organizing. In urban area in particular, it's a little bit more difficult than that. For those who are not able to return to rural areas, it's because, you know, they already lost the connection there. They're not able to go back because the safety net, the family safety net is no longer there for them. So in that case, they try to remain in urban area, taking on precarious jobs. And there are circumstances that put women and girls in to face certain unwanted situations, other things that we're trying to observe. And that is because those that have been laid off because of the pandemic have received certain benefits, but a lot of them who are part of this sector in informal ways do not receive any unemployment benefits. So just to give you an example and put it in context, the government sectors, which is normally referred to as the formal sector in Cambodia, about 50% of those who are supplying the government sector in Cambodia are working as subcontractors, meaning they do not have formal contracts. So these are the people who are not benefiting from any forms of benefits at all. The other things I wanted to mention is that relating to what Franz has mentioned, is that we work with micro, small and medium enterprises, and they too have been struggling quite a bit. Now, all of them, are a lot of them, those in the formal arrangement, more of the medium enterprises, they receive quite a bit of support from the government during this difficult time. But those that are not part of the formal arrangement, more or less, they are more of the micro and small enterprises. They are not able to benefit from the government stimulus programs. So Why I'm mentioning all of these are the major aspects, and we continue to observe, trying to understand what are the dynamics, and so that we could offer recommendation in terms of what will be appropriate way to respond, so that no one could be left behind in this pandemic. Cambodia, I wanted to echo Serey, that Cambodia has been very successful as a country that has been lifting millions out of poverty since the past couple of decades. And this success has been hampered by the virus, and with a lot of intervention. I think the government has put out 4 sets of interventions already, and I know that more to come, including cash to vulnerable groups, including various support to formal, small and medium enterprises. I've been working with champions across civil society organizations that are supporting people in rural and urban areas. I'm working with businesses and government and champions in the government. So everyone is well aware of what the situation we're facing. That's what I feel, and what else we could do. The challenge is, where could you find all of those resources, and in ways that will be manageable as well going into the future. Now to the last point.
Sorry to interrupt you, Solinn, but I'm just mindful of time, and we're already 15 minutes or less than 15 minutes from the end. So if you don't mind, because of the delay we have taken, and to be sure that as well Wisal has time and we can have a group discussion, you can maybe bring your remaining points into the discussion a bit later. Apologize for interrupting you, but really we are running a bit short of time because of the small issues at the beginning. Wisal, I just want to confirm that you're still here with us, that you can still hear us, despite the fact that we can't hear you. Please unmute your microphone and confirm.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay, excellent.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
So thank you very much for confirming, Wisal. Let me introduce you to the participants. So this is Wisal Hin. He's the co-founder and Director of Innovation for a venture called Platform Impact. Wisal has held several leadership positions for the United Nations, including in Asia, specifically in Cambodia and Pakistan. He strongly believes a new economy is possible for Cambodia and for Asia as a whole. So Wisal, as the world is adapting to the new normal that has been imposed on us by COVID-19, how Cambodia could benefit from the crisis and set new paths for a more equitable and sustainable development moving ahead. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you, Natharoun, and thank you for everyone and for the audience. I hope that you, sorry that you can't see me. I don't know why that is off. I believe that, first I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that the Asian have quite demonstrated the way how we should actually manage crisis and making decisions in time of crisis. And I think that we have to be very, I guess, in a way, acknowledging that the capacity of the Asian countries like Hong Kong and Singapore and Taiwan in managing that crisis. This crisis has opened definitely a lot of eyes, I guess, and in terms of exposing fragilities and challenges for countries like Cambodia. But I do believe that there's a lot of opportunities that we can learn from, and then we can actually turn this crisis into opportunities. I think one of the first revealing points is obviously that we realize that our economic model the current economic model is not adapted, it's not equipped to basically face these issues of the pandemic. And I think that it's about time to go beyond what, building resilience economic or resilient system. I believe that actually the crisis have taught us to go beyond that and becoming more, I would call it anti-fragile society or anti-fragile economy. Anti-fragile system is basically a system that actually not only rebounds from a crisis, but actually gain much more efficiency and much more improvements because of the crisis. So basically the crisis make our system and our economic model much more stronger and much more inclusive. So I think that it's not really a new concept, but I believe that Cambodia is extremely well positioned to advance that kind of approach, and we can apply definitely in terms of public health system, in terms of urban planning, or in terms of transport planning, all those kind of sectors where we know that by building an anti-fragile system will allow the country to really benefit from the crisis. I just want to bounce back again on the second point that Franz was saying, which is obviously the issues of supply chains. And I think that the crisis has taught also Cambodia that reinforcing, but more than reinforcing, is really transforming essential supply chains, particularly the food and the agro business, which, as you know, in Cambodia is a major employment source. And by transforming those supply chains will allow Cambodia to face the next crisis, which obviously will come anytime soon. The third point that I think I would like to raise is obviously the fact that digitalization has so much impacted our life, our private life, and also our professional life. It has also exposed the wide range of divide, of inequality in terms of access to digitalizations, in terms of the quality as we experience today. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for Cambodia to really think big in terms of connectivity and to reach the underserved community and underserved people in terms of healthcare, in terms of educations, via telemedicine and remote learning. And I think that Cambodia, due to its populations and demographic dividends, has a huge opportunity to play and to leverage in terms of digitizations. So yeah, I think that this crisis has put Cambodia in the forefront, I guess, in terms of designing a new normal that will be much more inclusive and much more, I would say, more, less fragile when it comes to crisis management. Hopefully that you heard me.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Wisal. Loud and clear. Yeah. Thank you. So the good news I'd like to share with all the panelists is that Sanjeev and Tenzin have allowed us to continue 15 minutes more. So they have delayed the other session that is just behind us as well from 15 minutes. So thank you so much, Sanjeev and Tenzin, for that. And I'm really happy because we're really just starting now the conversation, and we're going to do maybe a deep dive. So before I start to pick up some of the questions that appears in the that are coming from the participants, I'd like to take one point related to digitization, right? I think that this is kind of coming as a common thread, and so Wisal talked about it, Serey, Solinn, Franz as well. The point that she made relates to that. My question to all panelists would be: how can digitization be benefiting from an acceleration in terms of investment, in terms of skilling? We talked about, one of the panelists talked about reskilling. I think it was Franz, right? Reskilling workers. So what is a good way to really help Cambodia to accelerate on this path? We can see that, for example, in Phnom Penh, there is a thriving ecosystem that is supported by many development agencies, but it's still picking up. How can we accelerate it? And I think we just lost Serey. Maybe we're going to give her a few minutes to come back. Okay, she's back. So yeah, one of you would like to share your views on that? So how can we accelerate digitization? How can it benefit not only middle income and high income household, but as well include those low income and enable them a reskilling? Is that even possible when we talk about, for example, the garment workers that Solinn mentioned, and how we can benefit as well as a solution, a different sector that has been mentioned, such as the fishery sector, access to finance, etc., etc.
Serey, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm not. Thanks for letting me go. I'm not sure if the digitalization I'm talking about is somewhat the same as what Serey is saying. What Cambodia is an emerging market. We are young. We're only 40 years old. So there are a lot of technology out there that we can not copy and paste or just being a copycat. We can just take over or working with the country that already been through the path that we are about to get into now, to use their technology to help us to industrialize our agriculture, meaning that instead of farming the way we farm now, we can use the technology out there to give us a higher yield. That's one. Two, use the technology to do food processing, where we can become, instead of just selling raw mango where it can go rotten in 1 month or 2 weeks, we can make to dehydrated mango where it can pack for 6 months or 1 year, where we can export much further. So these are the technology where I think the Cambodia can adopt, and it cannot happen within the private sector. The government need to set up like not a policy somewhere of a direction where how some country they say one province, one product. For Cambodia, it's like the next 3 years be focusing in producing more in the agriculture, how to use technology in our farm field, like how Russia, you know, our focus is to go to space. So the country as a whole to do that, then everybody's focusing the energy in that. So if we have a framework, say this is the direction the country should go to, all the private sector would invest the energy towards that area, and then we will prosper from there.
Yeah, I think, Franz, you may have, maybe you should take a look at the government industrial development policy, which lay out where we want to be in the next 20 and 30 years. So that could be a guideline. I think government and private sector need to work hand in hand. I don't think government can do it alone, and I don't think private sector can do it alone, to your point. So there need to be cooperation. I'm in a sort of quasi-government, and there's a lot of things that happen in the private sector that we can't keep up with. You know, things are moving so fast in the private sector. So really to expect the government to be ahead of the private sector, I think it's a visual thinking. But I mean, we need dialogue to go along. But coming back to the questions of digitization, again, I agree with Franz saying that, you know, we're not aiming to go to space, but how can we use technology to improve our agriculture? And a lot of the times, you know, when we talk about digitalization, the problem is the skilling of our people, right? So how do we upskill or reskill our people to keep up with this, you know, this development? Again, this is something that, you know, for instance, where this cooperation can happen, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Labor and the private sector can come together and say, look, you know, we can. I think in certain international organizations, they partner with private companies and come up with a commitment by the private sector saying, I'm going to train this many people by this year. And so the government will enable this with certain sort of incentive for that. So this, again, just to pick up from Fran, is that there need to be both cooperation. Digitalization is going to bring us this. I've been looking at the development path of different countries. So the tigers, the Asian tiger that we know of, come from a very heavily labor-intensive sector, graduating to, you know, something more sophisticated, and then to the service sector, right? So an example that we can leapfrog is probably India, where they're coming from a very basic agriculture sector and now moving into the service sector. So India is the call center. IT in India is really fantastic. I'm not saying that we should be a call center, but I think this is possible. There's a model that we should look at using technology, digitalizations in terms of, knowing that the data that we can get by digitalizing in terms of agriculture, what are the weather in this particular area of the country, what is the level of rainfall that we can improve, what are the consumptions. If we can digitalize all the electronic commerce in the country, we could probably have an idea, how much consumptions of lemongrass there is in the country, and therefore encourage our own farmers to plant lemongrass rather than importing lemongrass from neighboring countries. So it can go a long way. I think private sector can come up with some initiative. The government has been in the industrial development policies. There are mentions about improving logistics, improving infrastructure. Of course, it can't happen over time, but these are already directions that private sector can look at and, hold the government really accountable on their own policy.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Serey, and Franz, for your great inputs. Actually, I don't know if Wisal or Solinn wants to add something, but I'd like to provide. Okay, so Solinn is nodding. Can you please? I'm going to provide two questions from the participants that will connect to the discussion. The first one has been raised by Rixmay, and hello to you, Rixmay. His question is: shall Cambodia continue to embrace tourism given the current situation, and shall there be any other sectors to be prioritized? Okay, so maybe his question is specifically on tourism, which we know is one of the pillars. And I'm going to bring, in addition to that question, another question from our friend from Singapore, Penny Low, and she has as well a very relevant question, broadening the scope a bit and talking about what are Cambodia competitive advantages and how could Cambodia focus on them. We talked about prioritization, we talked about digitization, and Serey just mentioned emulating the call service center or expanding the service sector into Cambodia's context. What are other high potential sectors, that could be leveraged? And Wisal talked about a change in the model, a change in the economic model. So how can both go together with the result of, accelerating change and improving the economy so that it can benefit, to more people?
I can come in now, if that's okay.
Yes, please, Solinn, go ahead.
Sure. So building on what has been said with Serey and Franz, and then picking up from what Penny asked as well, for me, I think the priority now, and from what we've learned from this pandemic, is to strengthen our food system. And I think this is the Cambodia's advantage when it comes to the agriculture sector and the food systems, is that Cambodia still have a lot of green land. By green, I mean the land that are not impacted by, that haven't been used with pesticides and chemical inputs in the past. And Cambodia, even with this pandemic, it is still very successful in terms of its export of organic produce, organic rice and other agricultural commodities. It's still very successful in terms of export to Europe and different part of the world. So I think the opportunity now is to strengthen the food system by making it safer. And if you're talking about the use of digital technology, I agree with what Franz said, that there's still quite a gap here. So anything we're looking at will be more of using technology in terms of the traceability for food safety. And that is something Cambodia has a strong competitive advantage. Because whether you like it or not, Cambodia is stuck between two massive and successful export countries such as Thailand and Vietnam. So it has to focus on its successful niche, which has been on safe and organic produce. So those are the things that something that we need to think about, but we have to think about that in conjunctions with the form of natural resource extraction economic models that we have adopted so far that are not very sustainable. I'm talking about large-scale non-food plantations that take a lot of surface land, use a lot of water, and it doesn't really help Cambodia to benefit from higher values of the trade. So these are the things that we need to rethink, and focusing on what has been said early on by my friends, that we need to focus on food, supporting our local value chain, but focus on special value that allow Cambodia to compete when it comes to export vis-a-vis the competitive advantages of Thailand and Vietnam.
Okay, thank you very much, Solinn. So we haven't heard, Wisal, you unmuted. You want to contribute to the discussion?
Yeah, quickly on the, I mean, fully agree on what the panelists were saying about, we're all saying about supporting the locals and the national supply chains, and particularly the food and the agro-industry supply chains in Cambodia, which is definitely one of the key major drivers beside garment and others and tourism. And so I just want to give some couple of practical solutions that we can actually explore to do that through digitalizations, like reinforcing the supply chain management efficiency through different software, or even on there's a lot of new solutions on demand warehousing platforms, for example, but also in terms of traceability and transparency. There's been a bunch of apps, from farm to fork, that will actually guarantee the consumer in terms of the safety and the security of the food, but also in terms of supporting our local SMEs who are involved in those value chains, in keeping the cash flow running by using new solutions in terms of supply chain financing, like point of sale financing or e-invoice exchange. So there's a bunch of actually tools and solutions that we and the market in Cambodia definitely is fertile for that. Now, in terms of the questions from the audience and in the tourism, and I mean, the question, I guess, is definitely yes. I mean, tourism remains and will remain a major driver for Cambodia. But I guess that the crisis has taught us to be less silo-driven in the sense of sectors specific and sector interventions, and trying to actually looking at from one solutions, how can we actually address multiple challenges or multiple problems. That's what I call the ride sharing approach, or the carpooling approach. It's basically one solution for multiple problems. And I give you an example, like yes, tourism, but tourism can also face a lot of issues, but in terms of waste management as well, but in terms of biotech. So when you put those three things together, tourism, waste management, and biotech, it seems difficult to find some synergies or some complementarities among those three. But actually, when you look at it, is supporting, for example, the silk sector. The silk sector is obviously one of the key ones in terms of the tourism. But you can actually use the raw cocoon as a raw material to basically connect into biotech supply chains and biotech value chains. And as a matter of fact, there's a couple of companies in Cambodia who are actually already engaging into that by diversifying basically the source of revenue for the tourism sectors, entering into more high value and chains like biotech. And using basically what Cambodia is known for, this amazing silk product and quality, is to use basically the silk protein to develop bio-coating materials, even actually in the use of the COVID-19 vaccine, to basically transfer the vaccines to people instead of using needles. So those biocoating system made of silk addressed basically the issues of waste management. As you know, that is a huge problem, not only in Cambodia, but worldwide, where basically 40% of what we're supposed to buy go to the trash. So that's the kind of approach I think that Cambodia should adopt, is this kind of ride-sharing approach, is that one solution covers and address multiple problems at the same time, and investing into the local entrepreneurship, investing into the ecosystem of responsible investors, of social entrepreneurs. Those are extremely important to. As a matter of fact, I mean, we don't have the choice. The crisis has taught us that either you stand up and you keep moving, or you lay down. So basically, giving the dynamic of the country, Cambodia is in a good shape for that. Okay, thank you, Wisal, for your inputs. Is there anybody from the panel that wants to react to Wisal? If not, I'm going to bring in two very interesting views from the participants. If that's okay with you, all panelists. Okay, sure. Thank you. So I'd like to bring in first the inputs of our friend Vivian. Thank you, Vivian, for the great question. Vivian is asking first, so we mentioned a lot, right? The central role of the agricultural sector and the innovation that is, that has to be injected within the sector. So she's asking, what is your view? What is your vision over the coming 10 years? How is that going to evolve? Yes. Do you see that as growing very fast? Do you see that as a change-making factor that is going to transform Cambodia economy? 10 years is a bit far, I know, but if you want to share your views on that. The second element, and this one is Riti sharing, our friend Riti. This is about, again, this is about fintech and digitization, and this is as well about, so there has been a lot of progress made, a lot of innovation, but the question is asking is, how do we connect high-level innovation to, low-skilled workers and users? How do we connect the gap and ensure accessibility of this technology to the widest population possible? And lastly, the other point as well, I'm coming back to Vivian. Vivian is sharing a very important point related to the role of the Tonle Sap within Cambodia. And she points out to government and UNDP reports and highlighting the water supply situation and the impact it may have in the next 10 years on the growth or the failure of key crops for Cambodia, and therefore the risk it presents to a share of the population that may goes to even half of the population, because we all know that there are so many people dependent on the Tonle Sap. So those are three elements that goes together. I don't have any specific panelist. Please, the one that wants to contribute first, please feel free to provide your input. Thank you.
I'm happy to come in now.
Okay, sorry, I'm sorry, Solinn. I'm just mindful of time, and it's already 9:12. I promised that I would respect the time, and I think we have 3 minutes to kind of share the views and wrap up. I know, I'm sorry, because it's so frustrating. I feel that we are just even scratching the surface in the discussion, and the four of you have so much
warming up session.
Yes, and that will be a warming up session. I really hope so, but I'll come back to that later. Sorry, Solinn, go ahead. Please be short. One point.
Okay. To the Tonle Sap thing, I think building on the system, what I said early on is that we have to rethink the And part of our economic models that has been adopted in Cambodia that is based on natural resource extraction, which is not sustainable, and these would not carry us through in the longer run. So to the questions from Vivian in the Tonle Sap, I think this is where we need to take a landscape approach to rethink the economic models we want to adopt in the longer term in this country, and think of it with the nexus of our food production system. I'll leave it here as we leave time for other panelists.
Well, I can pick up
two points.
Question from.
Sorry, go ahead, Serey. Go ahead, Serey, and then Wisal.
I'll pick up on Rati on how these high technologies relevant to the people with in the informal sector, rural sector. And I'll give you an example about just now about, how can we bring these, how can we improve the life of these people by using the digital platform. For instance, currently there's a lot of e-commerce happening, right? This e-commerce are sourcing from farmers. And at the moment, the way with e-commerce, you're expanding their market access. You're also helping them better understand, who they are targeting. If it is, individual users, or is it hotel, or is it, supermarket, so that you then feed them the information and tell them, look, this is what we need from you, and can you do it more? So that's just an example how it is relevant to them. And I don't want to go too high level on this.
Thank you so much, Serey. Wisal, you want to contribute with one last point? Very quickly, please.
Quickly, last point, quickly. As we know that, most of the companies in the SMEs, and to scale, they have to be investment ready. The new normal, SMEs will also have to be digital ready. And that's, I guess, the focus and the I would say, for the next couple of years, is to bring the capacity of our SMEs to be much more tech-savvy in terms of benefiting from the digital world. And as a matter of fact, I mean, when you become digital ready, obviously you have to get the ecosystem that support your business to grow. And the initiative like the World Bridge initiative with setting up this first SME Innovation Center is in that sense paving the way on how the SMEs, by coming together and by basically embracing digital technology, can scale and thrive through the crisis.
Thank you, Wisal. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt now and wrap up. And I apologize, friends, that I didn't give you a lot of airtime. I promise everybody that there will be a second and a third session for sure. I want to thank Serey, Franz, Solinn, and Wisal for the time and for the patience despite the technical glitch. I want to thank Sanjeev and Tenzin for their reactivity and for supporting us all along and making this panel possible. I want to thank all the participants, from Asia and from the other side of the world for their patience and for staying with us all along. I want to encourage everybody to attend the next session, which is called Rebuilding a Global Community Through Our Shared Humanity. And this session is hosted by our friend Wenxi Yu, which to whom we say hello. Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, Tenzin. Thank you, all panelists. Thank you, participants. And catch up next time.
Thank you, Natharoun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.